Brian Branch won't be walking through that door in Detroit at any point over the next few days because the news came out last night, expedited appeal. I wonder why it takes so long, though. The suspension was announced on Monday, one game for the scene that we all saw on Sunday night. Juju Smith-Schuster, USC's own Juju Smith-Schuster, the real USC, trying to shake Brian Branch's hand, gets popped in the face. He had his helmet on, so it wasn't quite the same as Trent Williams when he hit Richard Sherman after a game some 13 years ago. But there it is, boom, and that sparked a melee, a brouhaha, a fracas. Branch was suspended the next day, Myles. He appealed it last night. Hearing officer Jordy Nelson, which I'm sure that makes Lions fans all warm and fuzzy that a member of the Packers Hall of Fame was responsible for banging the gavel on the suspension. Jordy Nelson upheld the one-game suspension, no Brian Branch. It doesn't surprise me when you consider his history and you consider what we saw. It doesn't surprise me it got upheld.
Well, it doesn't surprise me either. And, you said considering his history, he's only been in the league for 3 years. And he keeps getting fine after fine after fine after fine. And you're like, hey, man, it's time to grow up a little bit. And I understand to an extent what he was saying after the game, which is that, I don't want to be bullied out there, and Juju Smith-Schuster, he got me on one. He's blocking me in the back. And then it's like, okay, but things happen over the course of a game. And what I find interesting kind of in retrospect, hearing Patrick Mahomes' immediate comments after the game to Melissa Stark, where
he was
said,
pissed.
He was. But what he said was, we play our game between the lines and between the whistles. And then Branch comes after and he does this kind of thing. And it's like, okay, if Branch is saying that this thing happened to me and I'm not going to get bullied, so then I'm going to do something else that is so obviously stupid at the end of the game, then hey, you got to settle that stuff when the game is going on. And even if you punch somebody with an open fist or whatever it is when the game is going on, that you're still gonna get penalized, right? If you get caught, it's still going to be 15, but you're probably not going to be suspended for the next game if, I don't know, you just shoved him after a play. And that's the way you wanted to determine this. You can't after somebody takes a knee, then go into the backfield and then refuse to shake the quarterback's hand. And then you end up hitting somebody in the face. What are you doing, man? Grow up. That really is the thing that I think it should be the message to Branch at this point. Grow up. Quit doing this crap because you're only hurting your team.
If he'd have done what he did to Juju Smith-Schuster after he got shoved in the back, he's probably getting a flag and a fine because we've seen that move this year.
Yes.
Taylor Tart did it to Travis Kelce week 1. And there's this weird open hand versus closed fist distinction, and they don't eject for a open hand, even though the rule book says otherwise. It's not the only situation by far where the rule book says one thing and the practice of officiating and administering a game says otherwise. But he could have done that and he wouldn't have gotten suspended. So it really is strange. And 10 fines over the last 2 years. And I understand why coaches like having a guy like that around. You want to have a guy that's a little chippy, especially because if he gets fined, it doesn't affect you. But then you don't have him for a game and it does affect you.
Exactly. Yeah. Fines are very different than a suspension. You can do whatever you got to do with a fine. You can avoid, you can say, hey, man, you're hurting yourself. That you should stop doing that. And 15 yards within a penalty over the course of the game, that also can hurt you. And especially if you're playing the Chiefs offense, right? You don't need to give them a free 15, but at least it gets settled at that point, right? You can't just hurt your team by removing yourself from action by doing something so flagrantly stupid. I mean, it was so stupid that Dan Campbell immediately apologized at his press conference. That's how stupid it was. I wrote the story at the end of the game and I said, apparently, because, you can't just say somebody started a fight when you don't necessarily know all the things that happen. But it was very obviously Branch that started the fight. After 5 minutes, right? And so once that happens, you're like, hey, dude, this is something where you have to keep your head. And now you're in year 3. right? This is something that is going to affect his contract talks down the line. I mean, it just is, because you're a liability now, not just for yourself, but for your team. And that is something that is very unfortunate for Branch.
And it was as clear as it could be that he was in the wrong. And Campbell said it was inexcusable. And Campbell has since said nothing else that happened before matters. But there's still emails, responses to tweets, interactions on social media. You've got Lions fans playing the whataboutism game. When's Juju going to get suspended? When's he going to get fined? And it's amazing we're in this place, and I don't want to go too far down this path, but there's always counter outrage to the outrage and then re-outrage. And people can find two sides to every issue, even when there should not be a second side to it. Brian Branch was clearly in the wrong. The game was over. That's the moment where all you do is say good game, exchange jerseys, do a prayer circle, and go home. The time for hitting opponents is over. And that's the message the NFL needs to send. They're very concerned about how things trickle down to the lower levels of the sport. They don't want Pee-wee players to start whacking each other after the game's over and they're doing the good game line down the middle of the field.
Yeah, exactly. And, I think to an extent, sometimes the NFL goes a little bit overboard on certain things, right? When you're talking about taunting fouls, maybe on occasion, right? And like celebrations, which they then pulled back on. And now every 5 seconds you're seeing the NFL account, tweet some celebration, right? But like, this is something where it is very obviously a sportsmanship issue. And I think you're right. If you're really that upset at the end of the game, just leave the field. Go back to the locker room, run off the field, run up the tunnel, and go home. But like, that's the way you address that. You don't then just start hitting people because you're upset when the game is over. That's not something we can do. And it's not something that the NFL can tolerate. And I think the NFL was totally right to suspend him for a game. And I'm glad his suspension was upheld, because this is not an acceptable act that he put out there on the field.
And he will miss a fairly consequential game Monday night, the early game in a non-overlapping doubleheader, which means drink a lot of coffee, take a nap on Monday afternoon, unless you're in California, where you got to get home from work early. When you work at home, that's not an issue. But it's going to be 4 o'clock, 7 o'clock West Coast time, 7 o'clock, 10 o'clock East Coast time, and the Bucks and Lions are in that first slot on Monday night. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.